expert webinar series. Session 3, which will be leveraging taxonomy term store for SharePoint, and really going to be focusing on is defining multi-taxonomy structures for content management. Apologizing up front, might end up running about 10 to 15 minutes over. Obviously, if you have to go on to another session or meeting, please feel free to leave. But we will actually extend the session out to provide all of the content on that additional 15 minutes. If you could go to the next slide. What we'd like to do today is obviously go over taxonomy management. Jill will actually be leading that part of the session. Can you go ahead and give a little background about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think you guys have already heard from me today, but my name is Jill Hanneman. I am a principal consultant with Project Performance Corporation. I've been with the company for about 8 years, working with our information management division. My primary areas of expertise are SharePoint information architecture design, and more particularly taxonomy and metadata design, and how to leverage these different structures within information management systems and different content management systems. I'll also focus on doing content and information governance, developing those different strategies, as well as content management strategies and content migration strategies. So really today we're going to be focusing more on the information architecture piece and how to leverage the term store, but that's about my background. So back to you, Don.
Excellent, Jill. Thank you. So again, a little bit about myself. I've actually been in what I'm going to say knowledge management space for over 10 years now. I've actually been with concept searching for about 3 years. And, you know, from perspective, there's nothing better than organizing the unstructured, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. To give a little background about concept searching, then we're going to slide over to Jill and provide a little background about PPC. Then Jill will go ahead and present her session on building out the multi-taxonomy structures for SharePoint. After she's done, we'll then go ahead and do a little session on conceptClassifier for SharePoint 2010, provides term store management and allows you to work with multiple taxonomies. And what it allows you to do is to automate the process of tagging content as you upload it into SharePoint. Again, concept searching itself, the company around since 2002, shipping products since 2003. And we are Microsoft's preferred go-to partner for auto-classification and taxonomy management solutions. Also a strategic partner as it relates to FAST. So everything that we're going to show off today from a demonstration perspective today will work not only with SharePoint 2010 search, but with FAST search. Our product suite consists of 3 products, Concept Search, Concept Taxonomy Manager, and conceptClassifier. And we'll be providing greater details on those products later on in the session. Company, again, we target Fortune 2000 customers. As said, I'd like to go ahead and pass this over to Jill and let her provide a little background about PPC and then move forward with the rest of the session.
And I just want to share a little bit about who we are. We are a 1,200-person consultancy. We are headquartered in the Washington, D.C. area and service many of the federal government agencies in the public sector, as well as doing some work for state and local governments and many companies in the Fortune 500 realm in the United States and also abroad. In the different bubbles, these are the areas of our core expertise. So we have focus on energy, environment, and sustainability. We also do infrastructure support, enterprise solutions, and application development. And then the bubble where I come from is the information management division within PPC. And so, you know, I like to think that this is a little bit more the information management bubble is a little bit more overarching and provides structure to unstructured data that many of my colleagues in the energy and environment, infrastructure, and enterprise solutions areas work with on a daily basis. So I'm going to share with you a few of our best practices and strategies that we have gone through our different areas of experience and working with different customers on SharePoint and taxonomy and metadata design. So I think up front, this is a very large topic, so I'm really going to just try to present you with some information to get you started in being able to design the information architecture and leverage the term store for your organization. So I'm going to present a few questions to hopefully give some areas to think about that can get you started in figuring out what is the best solution path and what the best architecture plan is for you. I'm going to touch on very briefly the managed metadata service, get in a little bit more into designing taxonomy, metadata, and term sets. I'm going to follow up with a brief discussion on the enterprise keyword section and how that relates to Folksonomy and how that the pros and cons of that, and then finally wrapping up with a few basic governance principles to apply to your information architecture once you have it all designed. The managed metadata service within SharePoint 2010 is really designed to allow you to now be able to have that enterprise metadata or enterprise taxonomies, controlled vocabularies that you can use across your SharePoint farm. So this is a really huge benefit, an upgrade from SharePoint 2007, where it was all very localized and you had to recreate your controlled vocabularies in every single list or library or at a site collection level. So what they've done is the managed metadata provides you with the term store, a nice area for you to manage all of your different metadata and taxonomies that you are going to then propagate and use throughout many site collections or potentially even many farms, depending on how large your SharePoint architecture ends up being and how many users you are serving. So the managed metadata service is really at the heart of it, the capability within SharePoint that allows these different taxonomies that we have in the term store shared across different farms and different collections and making everything that are very federated. So there are two types of terms that can exist within the term store. One is the managed terms and the other is the managed keywords. Managed terms are really what we're going to be focusing on about development of your controlled vocabularies, having multiple taxonomies in your term store that represent different facets of the information that you are attempting to classify. And finally, with the managed keywords, how this area complements from a social media perspective, as well as a placement for categorization depending on the culture and the nature of your business and how your users behave. I'd like to throw this particular chart into the mix because I think it's just good to have kind of a baseline of all the different terminology that SharePoint is now using to describe the information management pieces that exist in its world. So, you know, taxonomy and metadata really influence every aspect of information architecture as you are going through and designing how your SharePoint collections and farms are going to deliver business needs and respond to business needs that your company has. So from a site collection, site structure perspective, a taxonomy can determine the site structure, the hierarchical site structure in which users will navigate and browse through the different sites and get to the information that they're looking for. We get into libraries and the different columns, columns representing the metadata fields that can be tagged against the different content within a library. But the library itself can also have structure, or even a list can have structure that could be based off of some type of information architecture for a more a business application perspective or more of a departmental or small group focus. So they get into terms and the term set. So in this case, term sets are going to be comparable to our taxonomies or also our metadata facets. So I'm using taxonomy and metadata somewhat interchangeably, but in this case, a taxonomy is really just a hierarchical organization of objects. So really, if there is a hierarchy, parent-child, grandchild relationships, it can be described as a taxonomy. But for any term sets, we will be leveraging these term sets primarily as metadata facets to provide additional classification against our content. Content types. Last piece that I wanted to feature is a very powerful way to ensure that you are laying out the same metadata fields to various different lists and libraries, and also creating a content type that can help you also manage documents that exist within different libraries. So content types just provide another way to group content together, to aggregate it, to filter by it, or sort by it, and making sure that it always has the metadata associated with it that it ought to. So, as I said before, our term sets are going to behave as metadata facets, and really the goal in this exercise for building out your term store is going to be the build out of your multi-taxonomy structure. So having different facets that are hierarchical that can be used in different lists and libraries to additionally classify content. Finally, with your keyword term set, your keyword term set is going to be a flat structure of enterprise keywords. So anyone who might already be leveraging this piece into your term store and you go under the term set for enterprise keywords, you notice that it's just a flat list, unlike the different term sets, which can have many different levels depending on the organization. So the real question here is, what categorization is right for your users and what is right for your organization? What are your goals and what are you trying to accomplish? So we'll hopefully try to answer a few of those pieces. I'm going to touch first on faceted browsing and searching. So this is becoming a lot more common, a lot more useful in the workplace because of the amount of content that exists and because of certain inconsistencies that users can have in the file naming structure and as well as just where they're putting it. Provide a way for users to browse for content in a way that without content is just provide a lot of empowerment to users in many different enterprises across the country. So, a facet at its basic level is, the classification of an object. And when we have faceted classification, it's the multiple classifications. So I like to think about, a good example is like if you go to your public library and you are looking for a book either by its subject or by its author or by its genre. And anyone can walk into the library thinking about a book from any perspective, depending on how they heard about it or what they're looking for. They can browse through those books through any one of those different facets. So the same thing can be applied when we start looking at data within our enterprise. So I want to just give another kind of real-world example to make sure we're all on the same page about how we can start using these different facets to improve the findability and improve the searchability of the content that exists within your network drives and within SharePoint, and how to make information more useful. Ultimately, what good is this metadata and all these different classifications if we're not able to retrieve information more quickly, more accurately, and improve and create time savings and knowledge retention? So, these are really all the goals that we're aiming to get to. So the example that I'm sharing with you right now is one of Dell Computer. Eclipse is doing a really great job of leveraging facets and faceted browsing as a way to get users to the products that they're looking for. So I can walk into Dell.com, and whatever way I'm thinking about a computer I might be interested in or I might be browsing and looking for, I can come in and leverage any of their different facets: product category, operating system, laptop weight, laptop screen size, optical drive, etc., and start drilling down and filtering the result set that Dell's computer has to help me find the computer that I might be looking to buy. In the world of Dell's information management, each of their products is tagged and classified by each one of these different facets, making this possible. So, you can come in and, depending on what you might be looking for, filter your result set down to get to what you might be looking for. Now we get into the term set structure. There are a couple things to think about here. One is just organization, how people are going to be managing these different term sets within the term store, as well as how do you build your term set within the term store. What's the ideal structure, if you will. So it's primarily done in this tree hierarchy, listing group and then term set, and then finally into the parent terms and then child terms, and repeating from parent term to child term. So within this, we just have a two-level taxonomy. But there could easily be grandchildren terms, and it can go to great-grandchild terms below that. So however deep, how much detail you're looking to capture with your term set will determine the depth that you're looking to go to. So when we actualize this and we start putting this kind of in more of a business corporate intranet framework, we can start seeing that, maybe we want to group our term sets by, its business unit. So we can say that risk management as a business unit has its own group, and we want to capture the document types for that group, and, maybe proposed documents, forms, presentations, and then sub-child terms of proposal document. Some examples could be pink team, red team. All of these terms would then be available for users to tag content with when they are uploading it into a library or into a list. We put this in the context of the term store. Now here is a screen capture of the term store. You can see that the arrow pointing to group, there's always just, a default group that gets created when you start building term sets at the site collection level. And then you can start seeing beneath that group all of the various term sets that exist. And then beneath Carbon Software term set that we have, you'll see the parent terms, business technology consulting, and some of the child terms that are starting to exist, business methodology and data governance, etc. So it's a very tree structure, kind of explorer-like navigation that allows you a very visual way of setting up your taxonomies and navigating them and managing them. I think the only piece that I'd really like to mention is the fact that the group is really more of an organizational element to the term store. So it doesn't really impact the tagging as much as it does management of the term set. So if you are interested in empowering some power users or a different business unit to manage their own term sets, you can give them access to their particular group that has the term sets that they can manage in there, and not give them access to the rest of the term sets or the other groups that exist. So when we're in the term store, there are different options that you can have to manage your term sets as well as the different terms themselves. So when you right-click over any of the terms in the term sets or terms, you get a list of options that allow you to create a new term, copy term sets or terms, reuse, move, and delete. I think the only one I really want to highlight is the reuse. And when you're using any terms, this is kind of a really nice feature. So if you have a term that is the same that you might want to use in a different term set, you can replicate it from the source term, and whatever changes are made to the term, they'll get reflected wherever you've copied it, essentially. So this is kind of just a nice best practice if you are going to end up reusing some terms. So start your initial planning. The first thing I typically do when I try to understand what term sets we're going to be using is I like to think about the audience. Who is that will be consuming this content and contributing content to this. What are the areas, what are the facets that they care about? What are their business needs? So do they think about documents from a document type perspective? Do they come in typically looking for forms, or do they come in looking for presentations that happened in a particular date period? So these are all kind of different indicators in understanding who you're building for, and can also drive what initial type of term sets you may have to build your term store. So typically recommend that organizations come up with some global term sets, and these can be term sets that cut across all the different business units, different countries, different practices that can be used to be tagged against all the content. Different business units, different countries, different locations may all have specialized term sets or specialized areas that they need in particular to them. And that's okay, but at the heart of it, it's good to have like a global data that you can classify everything by. I wanted to give you all a head start. These are just a few of the categorization schemas. These are probably the most common that we see when we are developing different term sets. And these are the primary ways that I'd say that most organizations tend to think about their content. Granted, every organization is very different, but each one of these will kind of have their own spin on it. So, we have a subject-oriented term set or a functional term set, one by organizational unit, which department or area owns a particular document. Then document type, also very common. Location, which office may own a particular document, which country it might belong to, and also by different products or customers. So some of these facets are really good to search and filter information by, and can create really powerful facets that can help improve the way that your users are able to find and retrieve information. So touching back on the enterprise keywords, so the enterprise keywords term set in the term store is really kind of like SharePoint 2010's way of responding to this idea of Folksonomy. And so Folksonomy is a user-generated taxonomy. What it means is that any user in this particular column, when they're uploading a document, can create any free-form, single-line text meta tag that they think is appropriate for this particular document. There are a lot of terms going out now about social media, like Folksonomy, collaborative tagging, social classification, social indexing, tagging. All of these kind of relate to one another and kind of contribute back to this idea of this enterprise keyword. If you're interested in having any of these types of features, the enterprise keywords is a really good mechanism out of the box to start facilitating it and to see how it works within your organization. So there are a lot of pros and cons. You definitely lose some of the ability to have that controlled vocabulary, and you cannot necessarily create faceted navigation leveraging these enterprise keywords, but able to allow an easier mechanism for users to just create and label content based on what they believe it is. So tag clouds are usually the mechanism in which users are able to navigate the different tags. So I also put this slide there, faceted classification versus Folksonomy. So what are the pros and cons? I think both of them really complement one another, but as a primary means of navigating and providing findability, faceted classification is just becoming a very popular and useful way of improving the search and retrieval and knowledge retention of organizations. So the Folksonomy piece and the enterprise keywords are still embedded, heavily embedded into a lot of the social media features that SharePoint 2010 has. So a lot of the My Site features, wikis, and blogs all feed back to the enterprise keywords column or managed metadata in the term store. And so really both of them working complementary to one another. In some areas, social media is a little bit more conducive to sharing information and propagating, bringing prominence to different pieces of content. But it still shouldn't necessarily replace the core structured, faceted classification that you can get from having controlled vocabularies of these different types. I thought I'd be remiss to not include anything about taxonomy governance, just because I think it's very important. If you are about to embark on the endeavor of creating this information architecture or creating different term sets for your company, you want to ensure that this investment that you're making now to design these is going to last and it's going to evolve as the company evolves. So that's really the key here. You don't want to go through a whole redesign, overhaul effort every 3 years. You want each of these different term sets and taxonomies to change and evolve gradually as the different areas of the business may change as well. So, taxonomy governance really just puts in place what the processes are to monitor that evolution. So being able to create new term sets or create, delete, or modify new terms or align synonyms with some of the different terms that you have. And governance committees and governance roles and responsibilities are just groups that have that buy-in, have the knowledge to actively make decisions on the growth of some of these term sets or the growth of some of the terms, if some of them need to be merged together, if some of them need to be retired, if some of them need to be updated. So, this is just a good rule of thumb to start thinking about what the roles and responsibilities are and what those processes will be that will govern how it grows in time. Just a little bit more on the policies and procedures. So all of the primary actions are going to be within the term store. So who you give access to the term store, I think is a process that should be well thought out. The term store isn't necessarily a place where you're going to give, everybody who manages content in the portal access to. It's a very delicate area, I would say, that you would want to make sure that whoever does have access to manage these different terms and term sets really understands the fundamentals that go behind each of the different term sets, how these term sets are applied to content, and how users are using them. So they really need to be in tune to understanding just some of the basics about taxonomy, design, and maintenance, as well as usage. I think that's very critical. There are a few core things that I think should think about as far as what the simple rules are going to be, and who's going to have access to the term store, who can apply tags to the content in libraries, who create some of these keywords if you're going to be using them, and what areas will you be using the keywords. So it's just to have these conversations so that you have something in mind, you have policy in place on how you're going to be operating and continuing the longevity of the information management within your portal. So actually the next session that will occur in this will focus more on governance on the whole about SharePoint. So this is really only focusing and touching a bit on the governance as it applies to taxonomies and the term store. But please stay tuned and join us for the session in a month that will focus more on content sprawl, how to manage SharePoint from a content management governance perspective. So this slide is one that I like to present because I think that governance is very personal to each organization. So everyone has their different level of tolerance, if you will, for what they're willing to accept, how much freedom they're willing to give their users, or how much locked down the content management actually is. And every organization different levels of tolerance for these things. So this is kind of just a good way of trying to understand and figure out where do you sit in this spectrum. So in the tight end, where the threshold for content tolerance is pretty low, faceted searching and browsing, which has been the primary crux of this decision. But even though the governance is very tight, it is a very powerful way of retrieving information and creating that common and controlled vocabulary that you can attempt to use across many different areas within your organization. And then just at the very bottom, very loose, is that whole idea of folksonomy. So this is a lot more loose, and it works really great in social media and the World Wide Web. So folks on blogs and Wikipedia, a lot of these different social media sites are really good at leveraging looser forms of governance because there are so many people, and the abundance of people and opinions in bulk help to self-correct some of these things. So sometimes these principles don't necessarily apply or translate into corporations. So it really depends on your culture and the size of your organization and the influence and the interest that users have in being part of an online community. So in closing, I just wanted to sort of feature key issues that we commonly run into with developing some of these information management policies for term stores and for meta application within portals. But local terminology is a very key challenge. Folks in China call document one thing, and the folks in Mexico call it something completely different, but it's the same thing. So how do we reconcile these differences? A tool like concept searching actually has a lot of the different mechanisms to help improve some of these areas, but as SharePoint and the term store also has synonyms, ways to create some of these relationships between these different types of terms. Complex data sets, and this mainly relates to an application perspective, but complex data sets, consistency of the tags, and manual subjective content tagging all relate to manual application of these tags. So the perspective of the person applying the tag creates subjective tagging. The ability of these people to consistently apply the tags to the content and making sure that their consistent application and the complexity of the tags that they have to choose from. So all these really tie in together and make manual tagging sometimes a bit of a challenge. We really need to figure out how you capture detail in these metadata fields without creating a burdensome environment for your users to work and live in. So, always a very delicate balance you have to try to discover. A few best practices to keep in mind, and this is the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with, but these are just best practices that are near and dear to us, not just in the taxonomy world, but in governance and content management. But defining your use case, starting small, keeping the audience in mind, controlling depth and breadth, and making a long-term investment, I think are really critical to developing your taxonomies and your metadata schemas, your different facets. And breadth has to do with how many topics are, or how many terms are at any one given level, and what people can take in. And then the depth is how many levels, child, grandchild, great-grandchild. Usually when you get deeper than 3 levels, it starts to get very confusing for users. So our recommendation is always to keep it flat and shallow. So depth and breadth is very important. And make sure that you realize that, hopefully you are interested in creating an information management strategy and information architecture in SharePoint, but make sure that you're not going to be going through this process again in 2013 when the new version of SharePoint comes out. So that governance, I think, is really critical to making sure that the strategy you develop now can grow with your company as it changes and as new elements are needed. And so with that, I am going to pass it back to Dawn. Dawn, are you there? Are you ready?
I'm going to cross my fingers, Jill. Can you hear me?
I sure can. I think we're good to go. So whenever you're ready, I'll...
Yeah, do is have you continue to move my slides, and we'll just kind of cross our fingers and hope it sneaks today. So, in related to taxonomy, so why do we care about the taxonomies? Why should I have multiple term sets? Well, just a pure basic perspective on a hard ROI. These alone are why you really need 4 separate term sets within your store. And that's because when somebody uploads a document, we're really doing things properly. When we uploaded that document, we would align it with some kind of a migration strategy that says, here this document really needs to go, where this document needs to end up in the future. We would also apply a retention code to it for a records management perspective. And we would read through the document before the user actually uploaded it and said, hey, so-and-so social security number's on here. We don't actually want to expose that internally, so we want to apply a special tag for that. And then if we want to make sure that all of the information that is in the document, whether it's stated as a keyword or as a concept, we want that findable. And so obviously we would add metadata for that. Well, those 4 specific easy issues on why you as a company will need at a minimum at least 4 specific term sets within SharePoint 2010. And what we'll do is go ahead and talk about how our solution, conceptClassifier for SharePoint 2010, will automate that process and apply those metadata tags as well as all of the other values that we're talking about here on content for you. Next slide, please, Jill. Okay, so again, we're going to go over a couple more basics. Jill, next slide, please. Point perspective, the way this all aligns, in SharePoint 2010, they have what's known as the Enterprise Managed Metadata Service. And it stores our term sets. Really, it stores them in what's known as the term store. And, when we create this term set, we actually align it for a res library, a set collection, or SharePoint 2010 farm. Now, you may not know, in 2007, if I created a column, I would actually go and manually recreate that in each collection or each library. In SharePoint 2010, I no longer have to do that. I can actually leverage the content type hub. And the real thing is this is a subscription service basis, so that per library or collection or farm, I can actually subscribe to the specific content type that I want to use. I only have to create it once, and then I can leverage it where I need across the company. For SharePoint 2010 fits in as the tool that applies term store management. That means we can auto-apply all the metadata for document or object that you've uploaded into SharePoint, as well as actually change or update or move the document that we're talking about. We have a separate server, so we have our own Windows 2008 box that we'd sit on. And again, this natively integrates into SharePoint 2010. Into more details why that's really important, but from an architecture perspective, we are tightly integrated with the store. Next slide, please. Now, so we talked about 4 good term sets. Just as an FYI, so you know what the high number is that Microsoft recommends is not to go over 1,000. Anybody who's actually at that level yet, but that's the top level that you should be thinking about. In terms of terms per term set, they'll actually let you create up to 30,000 terms per term set. And again, I do actually know a couple customers that are either at that number or very close to it. So that number I think is actually very achievable. The term itself has been tested to managing 1 million preferred terms. So again, from a scale perspective, should fit for your solution. If it doesn't, what you can do is add additional EMMs and link them together, but we're not going to go into heavy details on that today either. Next slide, please. We've went through this once, but again, this is the term store itself, and again, Jill did a nice job outlining the different terms that we're going to be talking about. And again, max per term set is 30,000 values. Now, from your perspective, just think of how hard it would be able to go through a term set that has 30,000 values when we see that you know, it's not, there's a lot of land to go and look through all the values. If you have a tool that can automate that process, it'll make it a lot easier for you. Next slide, please. Works is when an end user uploads that document, they might have 2 tags, and here we see the little tag buttons on in the middle there. They select those values to the place where they're looking for the term. In this case, on the left-hand side, it's a retention code. Select that, and then select the tags on the right-hand side. Select the tag there, and that is how an end user has to apply the tags manually. Now, it's being cumbersome because if we had 4 term sets aligned with the content type, they'd have to do it 4 times, as well as selecting the content type. The bigger problem is that it's subjective. How to make sure that the end user consistently applies the correct tag every time. Next slide, please. Let's have an automated approach. And let's go to the slide, please. About an automated approach is because manual approach is going to fail at least 95% of the time. And there's major reasons. The first one being that it's inconsistent, i.e. have old content such as file errors. Those old errors, I might not have any metadata at all. But the reason is just that it's subjective. You gave just the same term and the same document and said, go apply those. Subjecting, we would most likely take different tags that need to be applied to the document. Well, we have consistency. Our search is on, our ability to do records management is on, and some information management doesn't work properly. So you have that consistency. So therefore, you have to have an automated approach. Next, please. Exactly what conceptClassifier for SharePoint 2010 provides. First, ability to model and validate your sets or your store. So the terms that you're going to put into the term store are actually accurate and aligned with your content. We're going to go ahead and then begin the tag process. Again, this is completely automated. We'll apply the data for the end user as well as updating the content type. That's used for findability, the ability to kick off workflows, sensitive information removal, and ultimately the ability to apply lifecycle management to your record. Next slide, please. Now, very beginning, the solution is actually integrated with the term store. Important. So that means we never have to worry about service pack updates. There's no custom code. This is a native integration right into the term store. When you're building out new apps, if you have to do this on yourself, by yourself, with columns, when you try and the different social applications that leverage the term store and the metadata, that's not proper, or require more custom code. By getting all of the search controls that are built in for SharePoint 2010 and fast, you're going to have to worry about adding new custom controls. Native integration. Now, why? Because we really had a number of choices. And it's because we worked with Microsoft to build the product the way that Microsoft said the product needed to be built. And they build it natively into the SharePoint 2010, and for 2 reasons. That is where they're going to be storing all that data as they go forward. 2, not only does it make it easier to add the product in with the SharePoint 2010 environment, which our solution is very easy to install, but it also means that down the road, should you choose to remove our solution, literally you have to do is turn the feature off, and the entire process goes back to a manual tagging process. So again, integration perspective, we tightly integrated it in a tree approach with Microsoft to ensure best value for our customers. Next slide, please. Searching. And again, a little bit about what we do and what separates us from everything else that's out there. Well, words, triple meaning baseball, heart meaning love, and bypass meaning freeway. By themselves, they're ambiguous. But it's together, triple heart bypass. We find exactly the concept that we're working with. Well, concepting has to extract out those multi-word concepts. And when what we do is leverage that for how we build out a taxonomy. And so again, building in that, out and suggesting ambiguous single word terms, we're going to multi-word concepts. Next slide, please. So everything works not with SharePoint 2010, but also with FAST, just as FYI. And what we're going to show is how to auto-apply metadata, update content types, how this can be aligned with retention code policies, as well as rights management policies, and how we'll improve the search, as well as for SharePoint. And everything that we're going to do is going to be coming natively from the SharePoint 2010 term store. Next slide, please. Now, a couple of hierarchy that's currently supported in SharePoint. Definitely ways to work around, but in those specific instances where the term store will not be able to manage your taxonomy or do what you need to do, of another product. And this is a product that actually allows you to scale above 30,000 values per your term set. And again, occasionally that will happen. And again, in those specific instances, this might be a good approach for you as well. Next slide, please. There are multiple ways to work with FAST. So of course, it could pick up the metadata in SharePoint. We can actually insert the metadata directly into the FAST index. On that, we're actually just a stage in the pipeline. Insert sense, and this is just to let you know we have a native integration with FAST as well. And in that instance, we're just a stage in the pipeline. Next slide, please. One more. That would work today is an end user would have to go in, manually select the tags, pick the appropriate values, click save, and update document. But if I'm documents, that presents a problem. Next slide, please. Because when I do a multi-upload, I can't go in and individually apply the metadata per document. So I actually have to go back and document, edit the properties, and assign the appropriate metadata. Even it's critical metadata, like a record management retention code. Again, it's not automatically going to get applied. Please. Again, term store management. By mean that what was the document, we will read through the document, the metadata, and then apply the appropriate retention code. The way box, if the document scores above 50, we apply the appropriate value. In this case, it would be T20-03 or 03.00. Now, this is most likely not in the document. Asset and risk management might be. As you can see, that would score 50. Or fixed asset protection also might be in the document, and it would score 50. If we see and the score above the threshold, in this case 50, the appropriate metadata value, even though that term is not a document. Next slide, please. What's that same set of documents that were uploaded as a multi-document upload? We can apply the metadata, and as you can see in the second document here, not only can we apply the metadata, we can actually update the content type. Next slide, please. And we're going to works directly with SharePoint 2010 as well as the term store. And you see that we're actually exposing a multi-value pick list that is actually coming directly from the term store. And again, exposed with FAST as well as SharePoint 2010 search. Next slide, please. And with that, and our fingers still, go ahead and be presenter, and let's share a demo. We'll get this done in about 10 minutes, and then everybody can be on their way. We do understand that people may have to leave, and again, if you do, thank you very much for your time. And I can go ahead and try and share the application. Just can you see the first document library?
I can.
Oh, that's wonderful. So this is your typical document library. And so what we do is go ahead and upload a couple documents. And this is just how you normally upload a couple of documents. As the screen has went gray, you're just going to have to trust me that I'm going and picking a couple of documents. Next screen, but I'm not 100% sure. And upload 3 documents. And is that, and again, a regular document upload process would happen. And so uploaded these 3 documents. So ceilings, like resume and newsletter. Now the system works this quick, or at least it can. I've already applied the metadata for the first document. So the first one, we've read the terms, and actually specifically the term set for IPSV taxonomy, and we've added these 2 metadata values. What you also see here is that we've actually changed the content type. So we've then updated this from a document content type to record content type. And that's because those terms has a records management tag on it. So in this instance, we've changed the document, changed the content type, and updated it to a different content type. Got 5. Just refresh. We'll see that not only did we the first document, but the document we've applied all of this metadata as well as appropriate metadata for the second document, which is a resume and has their social security number on it. So again, all of this was done in a completely other fashion. All I had to do was update the document. How does this work? I'm going to go ahead and slide here into the term store. And again, this is the metadata service, and this is set. Here we term fossil fuels. I'm going to go create a new term, and I'm going to create the term methane. And and I'll refresh this. And normally create a new term. Again, it didn't add because it was a timeout. The term, if I wanted to, as an end user, I could manually select it. But again, the biggest problem is consistency. So what we see is that not only we'll create that term in SharePoint 2010 in the term store, we'll actually do an update here. And this is called Taxonomy Manager. And this is where we actually do the term store management. Again, refresh. I'll go to term, and again, energy and fuel. And so what we've made and that term methane. And so from this point forward, if anybody adds a document in SharePoint and the term methane is on that document, we'll actually score it above 50, and we'll go ahead and apply that value to the document. This needs to be bidirectional, so I can add a term here as well. And let's just go ahead and add propane. And that means going forward, if I add a document in here with propane, it should get applied on the document without the end user doing anything. Now, if we go to our value and we go ahead and click Apply, we see that fossil fuels has been updated and that term is now in the term store as well. This is bidirectional. Your value. Now, this is great for the person who's responsible for administering the store itself, but how does it pay off for value to the end user? So again, go ahead and pull terms from a search perspective. We will see this has been added as well into my search. So now if I wanted I could run a multi-value pick list, and again, as I created those new terms, either in the term store or in Taxonomy Manager, they become available as a means to provide faceted search for my end users. And not only can I select here, but again, I could use that or leverage that as a refiner or a navigator in regular SharePoint as well. I want to show off, to keep this at our time limit that we all agree on, is a slightly bigger repository, because the initial repository that we were working with to show off adding and the removing of the term sets themselves. But here we're actually in a term store that has about 1 million documents. And this is about the ability to model, validate. We would actually do this first, validate the term set that we're working with, and then once so that it works correctly, then go ahead and add that term set to SharePoint 2010. We can have some governance along with our terms that we're creating and adding to SharePoint 2010. Now, what we hear is the first number tells me how many documents actually have the tag. The second number tells me how many documents there are in the total branch below it. So I have 52 documents that have been tagged with energy and fuel, and I have 607 documents in the branch itself. If I chose 52 documents, I only have to do click on my Browse tab and actually show those documents that we're currently working with. What I wanted to do again was show a little bit of the modeling capabilities. Let's go that we were working with, and let's go ahead and look at propane. I'm going to go ahead and add value. So one of the things that we'll want to do is build out the multi-word concepts that should be associated with this. And for purpose, we actually want to do propane as it relates to different regulatory processes that must be associated with propane gas. Take this, that will be propane, and that will be in just one moment. And what was the term we're working with? We'll just real quick. Hopefully. Let's just start over from here. My timing there, I was going to be done in March, but small issue here. Well, thing was the ability to actually terms that were associated with the specific we're working with. So we see that we have one document, hopefully one document. And what I really wanted to show was just the ability to extract out multi-word concepts from a document. I still do that here. I'm actually going to go ahead and click the Suggest tab. And what will show us is just that we can actually extract out the multi-word concepts, and then I actually go ahead and select these concepts, and they become new clues or terms that we're going to work with that support terms that we. In this instance, those terms would support fossil fuel. That does to an end for today's session. Again, I'm going to try and keep this to an hour, and I know that I have actually held everybody a little bit longer. Jill asked, is there just one question that somebody asked that you just see as the one question to answer before we close our session for today?
Well, actually, two quick questions that we can probably answer. The first was from a participant who is still using SharePoint 2007 and wondering what some of the term store capabilities are in 2007. And short answer that this is a new feature that has been built into SharePoint 2010. So a lot of the metadata features that exist in 2007 are simply build out columns with pick lists at the section level and leveraging those out to child sites and libraries and lists. So you use a lot of the capability of what we've been able to do, and you do not have the ability to have hierarchical pick lists, which is in essence the taxonomy or the multi-taxonomy structure that we've been talking about. Last question.
Yeah, and just remember though, actually you can do that with conceptClassifier for 2007. But it does take a little bit more setup. It is a more manual process. And of course, I never recommend someone to go back and start 2007 or in 2007. And really, as a company, don't see yourselves migrating anytime soon to 2010. And you have to be able to leverage a hierarchical multi-value select list. Search end users as either a refiner or a navigator. We have a solution for you. Next.
Last one I have is, what are some ways to encourage users to actually populate the object properties or the metadata? And so from a manual perspective, really the best rule of thumb is to make them required. If you are doing manual tagging, if you make them required, they have to fill them out. So it's not necessarily encouragement, but it is compliance. As far as encouragement, there are probably a number of different tactics you can employ, such as educating your users why it's important to, or providing some sort of incentive. But again, those are going to probably be very specific to your corporate culture. And really, what I hope is after seeing Dawn's demo of concept searching and conceptClassifier, you can tell purchasing a product like this can make issues such as compliance, populate object properties a non-issue. So if you have anything else to add to that, Dawn.
So with that said, Jill, do you want to go to the last slide or two, just so we can briefly chat about our next coming session?
Okay, I think I need you to...
Oh, I got to make...
Missions.
Not sharing. To you, Jill.
I still you, but you should be able to control the...
No, I made you present it. Yeah.
Okay. These are the last steps that are a part of this expert webinar series. The next one being next month in September, and following that October 19th, we're going to be following up the series, taking you through SharePoint governance and having a more in-depth conversation about managing content sprawl and some tips about. From the last one, thorough discussion on content and what are some of the 4 key content types to leverage. So it should be a very exciting. And Dawn, do you have any other last comments for our group?
Thank you, everybody, much. Everyone for your patience. Appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing everyone in September.
Well, and if you look in your chat, there is a note and a link where the slides and the recording for this presentation will be available. So we, again, thank you for your time and your patience today, and we hope to see you in a month in September for our governance discussion. Thanks.